This is the David Goodman Reality and Truth Show. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. My name is Vanita Lambert, and this is my very special guest, Miss Miriam Stevenson. We're going to be talking about civil rights and her journey there and how she started. But before I get into all of that, of course, we live in a COVID-19 with all different variants world. So I cannot start a show without talking about COVID-19. What you do is entirely up to you, but I just want to mention that what I'm seeing is a shift from the disease affecting the older people. Like when it first came out, it was like, it was affecting all the boomers, seniors, 60, 70, and older. Now what I'm seeing is that it's affecting children under the age of 12, kids that cannot get the vaccine. So there are babies in the hospital from 7 weeks with COVID. That's the earliest I heard on the news, to 11 years old, and those are the kids that cannot get vaccinated. And there's all these wars about wearing a mask and not wearing a mask in the school. And I just want to say that, these are helpless children. These are children that are getting sick. 174,000 kids were infected with COVID-19 in the past week. That is scary to me.
You know what?
What do we do? What can we do as a community about that? So these are helpless kids, and you got parents fighting that they don't want kids to wear a mask in school, and that these are some of the states in the South. I'll just call them out. Alabama doesn't have a single ICU bed available in pediatrics. They're all full.
It's true.
So, I'm not here to criticize anybody. I'm not anybody's judge. That is totally up to God. But if you're an adult and you're not vaccinated and you're doing everything you can to stay safe, how do you know you're not asymptomatic and passing that on to somebody else? It's a public health crisis, in my own opinion. I don't have any medical degrees or anything like that, so I'm not making judgment. I'm just voicing my opinion, and I can only go. I work in a business where it's all about the numbers. Okay, numbers is it's mathematical. That is universal. And what I'm seeing, the shift from us like boomers to the shift to little itty bitty kids. I saw a father begging people to get vaccinated on TV because he had a 1-year-old in ICU, and he said, I don't even know if I'm going to see my son again. And I don't know if he's vaccinated, unvaccinated, or whatever, but it broke my heart. I could barely watch it anymore. So what do we do? What's your take on it without, trying to force people to put something in their bodies that they don't want to? And that's my understanding of the unvaccinated. But I work with people that are unvaccinated and that refuse to wear a mask. So I'm vaccinated and I wear my mask when I go into like the grocery store and all that, because call me paranoid, call me whatever you want, but I want to be around. And that's pretty much the bottom line. So I always start every show off with that because we live in a COVID world.
We do.
And I'm sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
We have to think back to the other plagues, the Spanish flu and the Black Plague. Plagues usually last 2 to 3 years, and they affect everyone. What happened was, because we had a shortage of supplies and doses of medicines, the scientists said the adults go first. But the virus plays host to anyone who's available. I always knew that the children would be affected because there's so many of them. We have a large population, and my beliefs, which I didn't want to come true, has finally materialized. The children are going to be affected And even if they recover, there's going to be after symptoms. We have to protect them. If you don't want them to wear masks, then let them have the shot. You see, in this society, in this world, you can't have things both ways.
Good point.
You have to realize that it's just not the United States, it's worldwide. And until China tells us what kind of germ or disease this is, if it was a war manufactured or a natural virus, we won't know how to cure it.
Amen to that. That is very well said, Miriam. Thank you for your opinion on that. It's just so important to give your own personal opinion and not to, like, you know, try to force it off on anybody else. You know, that's what we are doing. This is just our personal opinion. We're not, you know, medical specialists or whatever.
No.
So thank you for that. And I really appreciate that. That's really important. So once again, I want to introduce you. This is Miriam Stevenson. She's a civil rights for all advocate, activist. She has a wide range of subjects that she wants to talk to us about, and I cannot wait to hear about your experience. So please tell us, you know, what you want to tell us, whatever you want to share with us, starting from the beginning, start from the middle, start from wherever you want. And thank you so much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, let's thank
You
Rick.
know, this is a treat. I'm 70 years old, and this is like a blessing. Hi, America.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Washington Heights of New York. My father, he was a postal worker, and my mother worked for the Board of Education in the school lunches. So for 7 years, we had a strong parental guidance at home until he left. I'm the cousin of Adam Clayton Powell. So at the age of 7, I was always involved with civil rights. Even though we lived in Washington Heights, I always went down to the projects in Manhattan to be with my cousins. I always had a sense that there was some disparity in the way we lived, because I used to say, Mommy, when we go to Macy's on 34th Street, those buildings look different from the one we live in. But she said, never mind that. You're still living good. So at an early age, I became involved with different social groups. Mm-hmm. At the age of 13, I started going down to 125th Street and hanging out with the Black Panthers. But being young and impressionable, I wanted to go to California to be next to UEP Newton. You know, which they told me that was impossible, and that wasn't the reason for a cause, you know. I helped them sell papers, but being young, my mother finally came down and said, no. Gradually, I just kept reading and going to poetry recitals on 125th Street. Joined Barbara Ann Tier. She had a dance class down in Harlem. And then finally there was the Last Poets. And then I met Felipe Luciano. He was going to become the leader of the Young Lords Party, which originated out of Chicago. That interested me because it involved Black, Hispanics, and everyone. See, in the beginning, the Black Panthers, which is understandable, was just a Black unity program.
Right.
You know, for feed the kids, you know, education and health needs. But with the Young Lords Party, because they were all young, and we were able to focus at a new beginning in Harlem, you know, with the garbage strike, taking over the People's Church, then finally Harlem Hospital. Mm-hmm. Wow. And with my background from my cousin, that gave me the strength to do these things which females usually weren't engaged in. This led up to me becoming a forceful female like Foxy Brown.
I like that.
So I started hanging out in the village at jazz clubs. And
What's the village? What village are you talking about?
The village in New York. I was still in New York City.
Okay.
Downtown 8th Street.
Okay.
4th Street, the Blue Note, different clubs like that were well known, but that's not the ones I hung out at.
Okay.
It was secondary clubs on 2nd Avenue where they still had jazz and poetry. So I started becoming involved with different people down on, they call it the Lower East Side.
Okay.
So I became exposed to other nationalities because even though I was born and raised in Washington Heights, that was just basically black and Jewish. You live here and they lived there. So there was no Italian mix yet, and there still isn't, because as I got older and got to know them, they said segregated in their own areas. In Brooklyn, Little Italy in the Bronx, and Staten Island. So about the age of 15, someone took me to a club in Midtown Manhattan, which I won't name.
Because you were underage. And you probably shouldn't have been there, but anyway.
And he left me at a table because he said he had to go in the back and do some business. And then I met this Italian football player. So that was to become the beginning of my life from then on. I want to write a book to explain all the circumstances which led up to that and what happened afterwards to help someone else who's in my shoes or give them the experience if they want to try to do that. I was never involved in an interracial relationship, never had a social contact outside of the black culture, so this was entirely a different scene to me. I couldn't tell my mother because, like you said, I wasn't supposed to be there.
That's right. I didn't tell my mother a lot of things, so don't feel special.
But I enjoyed it because of the attention. But on our first date, imagine this. I'll make up names. One name, he's dead, so imagine this. He invites you out to dinner in his bar, and you're thinking you're going to have a dinner between the two of you. Mm-hmm. But because you don't know their culture, that's not the way it is.
Okay.
So imagine a long table with all his friends in the middle of the bar, the middle of the club. In the surrounding table, you may have Bubba Smith and everybody else and all these other people eating. And then you walk in and you're like, what the hell?
So you had dinner with the whole club, the
The
whole
club.
family?
The whole thing.
This is a reality show, so you can mention names. So it's you and this, is it an Italian guy?
Yes.
Okay, so that was the beginning of your interracial relationship with, okay. Who was he? Can you tell us who he was?
I have to talk to my lawyer.
I'm sorry?
I have to talk to my lawyer. I don't know
Okay,
if
so
I'm...
then don't do it. No,
Okay.
if it's going to create any legalities. Okay, so we'll just say, you know what
So,
they do in Washington? Individual one. We'll say individual one. Or go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
that's okay. So, we all sit down.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden, this big, tall, blonde guy comes from the back. He comes out with a pitcher, and he pours the water over the guy's head, who I was, and he says, "So now you're eating with niggers."
Oh.
Now, this was the 60s. Mind you that I was Foxy Brown, okay? But everybody didn't like that. For me to not do anything. Out of the back, out of the closet, out of downstairs, boom, this door opens and a guy of equal strength and weight comes up and pounds him. I mean, this was a fight of the century. I couldn't believe that this guy had the audacity in the middle of Midtown to do something like this. This was my first interracial experience of hatred.
And this was like, we're talking 55 years ago in New York.
55 years ago.
And this was like what year? 1960?
67 or 66.
We barely had civil rights at that point. So I'm not real surprised since it's from that era. But anyway, go ahead.
But I was surprised, hearing stories, from my grandmother about lynchings and beatings. And living up north all my life, I never experienced a racial incident.
Right.
Until then. And even then, at the 11th grade, I was working part-time in a special program after school in high school. So I had, my coworkers, my boss. So I wasn't prejudiced or racist. I knew Caucasians, but to actually hear it.
I can imagine.
And then for this other person to experience it, but it was like glee and happiness, because as the blood splattered, I remember, because I was so vicious and angry, licking my lips at the blood. And I remember the smile that came out of the corner of his face. But told my mother what happened. She said, "Oh, that's all evil. You shouldn't be there. You shouldn't be," have my mother, blah, 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 blah. But then that was the beginning of me, because that was the beginning of the movies being made of The Godfather, because don't forget, we didn't know anything about Italians until the Valanchy papers came out, when Valanchy said they did secret ceremonies. They were like so underground and non-existent. Who were these people?
Yeah, that's because, everybody stayed in their own communities. Just like, like I'm from Father Panic Village. We all stayed in Father Panic Village. And it was just, predominantly black, a few Hispanics and whites, but we all stayed there. And then the Jewish community, they all stayed together. And, the Jamaicans, everybody stayed in their own little communities back then because of, the way things were. So, now I love it now because everybody is mixing. And it's important to understand the history of each culture. And that's what I see happening now. Like for me, my first, growing up in a village, I was about like 7 or 8 years old, and I saw this woman. I was with my mother, and I saw this woman, as black as I am, speaking Spanish, and I was in total shock because I didn't know Hispanic people were as dark as me. So it's just, I love the way we are taking an interest in each other's cultures. Like, and it's just such an open community with interracial relationships, with, gay and, the whole GBT community, and just everybody. Just being an open culture, saying who you are, being who you are, and being proud of that, and mixing with whoever you want to mix with. I'm a firm believer that the best you could be is who you are. Like, I know a lot of folks that came from Father Panic Village, they would never say it because now, they dug their way out and now they're, living in a big house or whatever. They don't want anybody to know about their past. I'm proud
of my
everything.
past.
I'm happy to be alive. I'm lucky to be alive coming out of there. You know what I mean?
Me too.
So, your story is very interesting. So that your first, you were 15, right?
About that.
15,
and,
16,
we'll
and you
it.
had your, your date, and you thought it was just going to be you and this Italian guy, and it ended up being the whole club, which was probably his family. I mean, you saw the Godfather.
These were, after we started really seeing each other, they were always there, so I learned that when you go out with, like wise guys or, anyone of that culture, they don't necessarily have to be a wise guy. They always stay together. Just like the bros, just like the pimps, they bros, they stay together, but it was like different because they weren't bros, they were Italians. So, like you said, when you go into a different community, everything changes.
It sure does. It's it's a family,
Yeah,
everybody have their own community, their own religions, their, whatever habits they do. Like, most people sit down and, have dinner and say grace. And they do it all together. They're just used to their own, routine and their own culture, things that they do.
And like blacks, we are very secretive. Hispanics are sort of like the Italians. Everybody has to be there. Yeah, that's what shocked me, cultural differences.
Yeah, that's it. And once we start learning, respecting, and just experiencing each other's culture, then we can understand people better. What separates us, our petty differences that separate us, is what? The texture of our hair, the color of our skin, or the region that we come from, And once we start to learn and start eating Italian, well, we always ate Italian food, but, Indian food, Italian foods, and just get to understand, go to like I went to a Greek wedding and, how they do things. And God forbid, black funerals are, when you see them on TV, they're funny, but when you're there, it's very, it's very different. So when we all, every diverse, when we become diversified, then that's when we become united, and that exemplifies the true meaning of the United States of America, because we're all immigrants, we all came from somewhere, and we all have something special to, share.
But I've been watching YouTube, and we were interconnecting even when we were in Africa, the Romans. I went back, I was listening last night.
Where were you in Africa?
No, I mean on YouTube.
Okay.
And they were talking about, back in the 5 BC, that there was a connection always between the Egyptians and the Romans. They were no strangers to each other.
No, they weren't.
Everything became strangers when we came to the United States.
Yeah, when you start to just separate, I think
when we segregated ourselves.
Exactly.
Because each was afraid of each other's, what we considered each other's territory, but you didn't really own the blocks anyway. But like in the movie Godfather, this part was Harlem. Oh, I own this. This part was this part. The Greeks own that,
Right.
You know.
So what information or what, yeah, what information that you would want to share with the community about interracial relationships? What advice or information or comments, or what would you tell the community about interracial relationships through your experience?
I want people to know that there are people out there who are still really racist. There's a difference between a racist person, a prejudiced person, and a person who's trying to understand. Okay? Because I've worked and I've been amongst outlaw bikers, so I know. A racist person don't want to give a damn. He don't want to hear what you have to say, period. A prejudiced person is willing to say hello and listen. And the other person is willing to give you a chance. Sometimes the prejudiced person, who could be real prejudiced, will give you a break and let you into their world. But I want everybody to understand that we all live in different cultures, and unless we stop the hatred, we aren't going to get anywhere. Because I don't see any, I'm 70. From the 60s till now, people are still thinking the same. So why am I here still talking about it when we should have moved on?
Exactly. You know what? I think that I think attitude and what's happening or what happened in our country is a clear reflection of the leadership. So, this goes by so fast. We have like 30 seconds left. So I'm going to give the last word to you. I want to thank you for being on the show, and we'll have you back again next week. So what would you like to say really quickly to our audience before we go? You got like 10 seconds.
Okay, I want you to listen next week. Next week I'm going to talk about me and the mob. I'm going to really be foxy.
You and the mob? Okay.
Okay.
All right, great. Thank
Love
you
you
so much. This is the David Goodman Reality and Truth Show, and we're on your side.